Hello, morning everybody. Here we are again. I hope you enjoyed that discussion this morning. I thought it was fantastic. I learnt a lot and they didn't use language I didn't understand either, which was pretty cool. We're here this morning now with a long time colleague, Hans KREMER from the Netherlands. Hans has been coming to CPIM conferences on and off for pretty much, not, if I say as long as I can remember, it makes him sound terribly old, which he's not. He represents an organization called Inchainge, and they are the owners or custodians of the Fresh Connection, which is a learning simulation tool that we've been working with a number of companies over the years, and they've subsequently developed all sorts of new ideas, new things, and the whole idea of gamification and getting companies to understand that simulation learning is not frivolous. It's actually important. It's actually vital. And people learn differently, and we've all learnt that so strongly in the last 18 months when we've had to change the way in which we learn so dramatically. Hans himself is he's one of those clever chaps with lots of letters after his name and a lot of APIC certifications as well. So he doesn't just talk the talk, he's got the knowledge, he's got the practical experience, and so can talk from a position of power as far as the value of the learning tool, because he strongly believes in the importance of education and understands and promotes the fact that, like me, he believes education is not just found in textbooks. So without any more waffle, again, from me, I did enough of that yesterday. I'm keeping it succinct this morning. I'll hand you over to Hans, and I know you'll enjoy his presentation. Hans, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Can you properly hear me?
Hear you very well.
Very well. Then I'll start sharing my screen. And we'll go over to the presentation. So, sharing. So, can you see my PowerPoint?
Loud and clear, crystal clear. I can anyway.
Very good. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to be back at CPIC, though being it virtual, of course. I hope, and we have our fingers crossed, that we will all meet face to face anytime soon again. But it's great to be here. It's great to share with you my presentation on gamification as a strategy to improve supply chain resilience. And can't we use a little bit of supply chain resilience in these times that we're in, all of us? So, yeah, let me share with you what I'm going to speak about. And if there's anything amiss, because I can only see my full screen, do drop in and let me know. But I'm going to talk a little bit about supply chain risk management, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about supply chain resilience. And then, as Jenny said, since I come from a practical background, I myself, but also my colleagues, we've been in the supply chain trenches. So I also want to add some context to supply chain resilience, make it pragmatic, make it applicable. And a great way of doing that, in our view, is gamification. So that is what we're going to discuss today. So having said all that, if we look at classic supply chain risk management, I put the word classic in front of that, although the topic is not even that old. But we look at supply chain risks typically from an angle of what is the impact if we are hit by a certain risk or supply chain event, and what is the probability of that event or risk happening to us. And if we consider the impact and the probability low, you see that on the left bottom, then we have a very different position as opposed to if we consider the impact to be high, and especially combined with a high probability. And then we put these options all in a matrix, and we're saying low impact, low probability. Well, then the risk itself is low. Don't worry too much about it. Maybe take some measures, not too many. But the more we move into the corner of high probability, high impact, yeah, that really gets our attention. And then typically we have two ways of going about this. And I make this I simplify things. I know that. I only have an hour to speak to you. So let's not go into too much detail there. But if we look at what typical strategies then are, is that people either choose to prevent. We can prevent a risk from happening. For instance, if we have a supplier in a certain area where we think a risk will occur, we can move suppliers. I'm not saying that's all that easy, and it depends very much on industry. But we have ways of preventing a risk from kicking in by simply taking measures. Or if we're saying this particular supplier is in an area that we need to stick to because that's the sole or single supply that we have, let's at least mitigate the effects of a possible risk occurring, of a possible event occurring by instance, for instance, by having extra inventory or sending out smaller batches. So if a batch is affected, not a big piece of our inventory that's in the pipeline is affected. So we have these two typical strategies that we can choose for. Question is, however, does this still apply? Because classic supply chain risk management may no longer suffice. We have what we nowadays call black swans. And I understand from the book that Nassim Nicholas Taleb has written about that, and he made the phenomenon of a black swan much more well known. But we used to think until about 1600 that black swans did not exist until they were found. Therefore, he refers to highly improbable and unpredictable events as a black swan, because we somehow cannot fathom that these things may happen. So they're highly improbable, they are highly unpredictable, they have a massive impact, and once they have happened to us, the funny thing is that we as humans, then we come up with a storyline. We become sort of Captain Hindsight, and we say, "Oh, but now we understand why that happened," and those are the reasons for it. But we're not so good at going about black swans, and we're not saying here that all black swans are a crisis. It could also be something positive. If you win the lottery, highly improbable, highly unpredictable, but that's a nice event. That can also happen. So it's not always doom and gloom, but we often connect it to doom and gloom. And not all crises are black swans, by the way. Sadly enough, we see terrorist attacks on the globe happening quite regularly. But the one that happened on 9/11, of course, that was the one that was unprecedented, and that had much more fallout and impact about what happened afterwards. So, and as humans, we don't seem to be so well wired to deal with black swans. We are not so good at estimating risk, and we tend to simplify things. So we need to somehow find a way of dealing with black swans, and classic supply chain risk management may no longer be the proper road to go. So having said that, we need to go to what we call nowadays supply chain resilience. If you look here, there's a definition here: the ability of a system to return to its original state or move to a new, more desirable state. That's interesting, by the way, after being disturbed. And a lot of research has been done on this as well. So one of the people that has done a lot and has written a lot about supply chain risks and supply chain resilience is Yoshi Shafee from MIT, and who has written this very interesting article already in 2005 called A Supply Chain View of the Resilient Enterprise. And there's where this little graph comes from, where you see depicted what happens if you get hit by an event. And this is a timeline at how that could play out. And again, dependent on how well prepared, on how resilient you are, this graph will look differently. You may even end up in position 8, where the long-term impact is there. You may even end up with your line above the situation that you were before. Because supply chain resilience, if you are resilient, then that also opens up opportunities. Looking at supply chain risk management on one hand, looking on supply chain resilience on the other, you could actually say that's sort of a half full, half empty glass look at the world. And you may recognize this. If in your company or in your environment people speak about risk, it's often spoken about in the sense of we need to minimize risk. And that's pointing back to what we just called prevention and mitigation. We consider risks a threat to our business, to our existence, to our way of living, and we try to avoid costs. We try to avoid disruption. We try to find out about vulnerabilities that we have. So it's often about things that we know about and that we then sort of try to quantify in terms of impact and probability. And then we have remediation. So the supply chain resilience is actually a totally different approach. You want to maximize resilience in your supply chain, in your organization. You want to be able to bounce back from almost any event that can hit you. And then resilience provides opportunities, because if you're more resilient than the competition, you get competitive advantage. You may even win market share, and it might benefit your brand, and it also might benefit shareholder value. And I should have stated there, it might benefit other stakeholders as well, because that's also a look on the world that we have. Right? We all have a stake in the businesses that we're in, and all stakeholders can then benefit if you are resilient in that sense. So yeah, if we speak about supply chain risk management, if we speak about supply chain resilience, that was a bit of a theoretical approach. But let's then provide some context to supply chain resilience. Let's bring it to life as sort of a preparation before we start gamifying this, and before I'm gonna invite you to take part in this session as well. So when we provide some context to supply chain resilience, for that effect, I brought with me a little supply chain, and we're gonna work on this supply chain, and we're gonna try and make it more resilient. But what is this supply chain that you see in front of you? Because it's quite simplistic. This is a little company called The Fresh Connection. It's a virtual company. It sits in the cloud, and I've brought it with me so I can share it with you. And what this company does, it sources 5 components that you see on the left. It sources orange pulp, mango pulp, vitamin C, and it sources 2 types of packaging, 1-liter cartons, and it sources small PET or plastic empty bottles. And with those components, they make fruit juice. They mix and they bottle their pulp, they add water, they put it in packaging, and they create fruit juice. So these 5 components that they're sourcing, they go into an inbound warehouse that they operate. And from there on, they go into a mixing operation, into a bottling operation. And once that is all done, they have created 6 flavors out of these 5 components. And these 6 flavors, actually I should say 6 products. There are three blends in terms of flavor, and these 3 blends are then divided across 2 types of packaging. So you end up with 6 finished products. And these 6 finished products then go to 3 retailers. And the retailers have a name. They're called Food and Groceries, Landmarket, and Dominique's. And I've added a little logo that may make sense to some of you, although it's more focused on Western Europe, you could say. But these are names of well-known retailers here. Carrefour, that's Belgian, and it's typically a high-end retailer. Aldi is more of a discounter. And then Dominique's is actually a convenience store which is connected to a gas station. So that's shaped like the French brand Total, which is a gas station in France, and they operate some small stores. So I've brought this little supply chain with me to start playing around a bit with supply chain resilience, and to include you in an endeavor to become more resilient in this session. Now, another thing is, if we want to go about supply chain resilience, if we want to do anything in supply chain, you could actually say, also managing a supply chain, then we need to understand what our supply chains are, in a sense. We need to have some basic understanding, as Joshi Sheffi again says, in another book of his called The Power of Resilience. He says, first you need to understand the basics of a supply chain. And once you have that under your belt, then you can start becoming resilient. That's actually his message. And I truly believe in that. So if you don't have a proper foundation, then you cannot build a skyscraper on that. And then it will topple over. So we need to have a fundamental understanding of our supply chains. And he talks about 5 different aspects. And the first aspect that he talks about is that we need to understand the parts that go into a company's products. And he calls that the what's. Now, if we go back to the context that we just described, the what's, those are the parts that go into our fruit juice product. So that's the orange, mango, vitamin C, and packaging material. Those are the what's that we're discussing related to this supply chain. So that's what we need to understand first. And then he says, yeah, but oh, wait a minute. It's not only about the what's that we need. You could say it's sort of a bit of a bill of material like approach. We not only need to know the what's, but we also need to know where are these parts coming from, who is making them, where are they going, and who is then using them, and what is being done with them. So it's about who is supplying me, who is shipping these parts where to. So the location where the products are made, assembled, distributed. And then, of course, if we're talking about various parties in the chain, what are the flows of the parts and the products? And at the same time, what is the flow of information and cash? So if we bring that back to the Fresh Connection, the virtual company that we're discussing, then we actually have a situation where we have the Fresh Connection itself, the fruit juice company itself, sitting in the Netherlands. And that may not be a surprise because I'm from the Netherlands. So that is why we put it there. And then we have 5 suppliers of the components that we just described that we need, and they're all across the globe. So orange pulp coming from the United States, from Florida. We have vitamin C coming from China. And then we have 3 more suppliers sitting in Europe, 2 of them in Spain for our PET bottles and for our mango pulp, and our cartons are coming from France. And then we have 3 customers, and they all sit in the Netherlands again. The 3 retailers that I spoke about, food and groceries, Landmarket and Dominic's, all 3 sit in the Netherlands. So you have a little bit of an idea of who, where, and how things move, goods, information, and cash. And then last but not least, of course, we also need to deal with inventories. And we have inventories sitting everywhere in our supply chain, you could almost say. And that's another where dimension. So the moment we have all these 5 things put together, if we have a proper understanding of it, and let me then finish these 5 aspects, because if we talk about where related to inventories, we have inventories in our inbound warehouse and in our outbound warehouse. Those are the components that we received and the products that we're going to ship to our retailers. But we also have work in process. So we have inventory sitting in our mixing and bottling operation, components being processed into finished products. And of course, we have pipeline inventories as well. That means that components are being shipped from suppliers to us. They're in the pipeline to us. And finished products are being shipped to our customers. That means products are in the pipeline towards customers. So now we should have a proper understanding of all these 5 aspects of what the supply chain is about. Now we've treated all 5 of these. And then we have a proper understanding of what we're dealing with. So now it's time to start the gamification. Now it's time to also bring you into the loop. And for that, we also take another model of a great supply chain thinker and a great supply chain learning institute, and that is Cranfield. And at Cranfield, there's a professor called Martin Christopher, and he has done a lot of thinking and a lot of modeling on how to become resilient as well, just like Yoshi Shafi and MIT has. And he's saying he focuses on 4 big areas when it comes to becoming resilient. He says, first of all, you need to have a proper setup of your supply chain. And if you don't have it, you may need to re-engineer it. And that's the first darker blue square that you see. We have 14 squares here, so we cannot treat them all at length, but we're going to focus on these 4 darker blue areas. And you also see that he talks about supply chain understanding as well, just like Yoshi Shafi did. So we've done the supply chain understanding piece. But he also looks at collaboration in the chain, internally, externally. He takes a good look at culture, because culture has strategy for breakfast, as they say. So culture is important. And he looks at agility. How agile is your supply chain? And we're gonna go past all these areas. But why do we then gamify this? If we talk about gamification, why is that then so powerful? Let me add some words to that. If I go back to how I learned to ride a bicycle as a kid, do you think I learned it by theory by any chance? Did my parents perhaps give me a lecture? Did they make me read a manual? No, that's not the way it went. They did it like this. They put me on. They learned me by doing. That took me some bruises on my knees and elbows. I fell off a couple of times, and at some point I got the hang of it, and it proved to be a very powerful way of learning. And another advantage is that you're now listening to me, but after this talk, within hours, you will forget a lot about what I say. Now, you also already see some pictures and some slides that already improves retention of what you are going through. But going through an experience gives us the highest retention of all. Many of you may have gone through the famous beer game from MIT, and those of you who have gone through it. For some of you, that may have been quite a while ago. For me, it's been tens of years ago, but I still remember it. It retains. So it's an experience is really helpful in retaining what you learn. Another thing is that learning only occurs when someone wants to learn and not when someone wants to teach. So I can take a horse to water, I cannot make it drink. So we as trainers, we as teachers, we need to make sure that people are engaged and that people are immersed. And gamifying your learning is really helpful in that regard. So that's why we have chosen to do so. Now, so I've brought a game. This is our game. The Fresh Connection is our game. And the Fresh Connection is, as I already said, a producer of fruit juices in the Netherlands. It's not doing well at all. They have a poor performance, and they're running at a loss. And we have a new management team. Actually, the whole audience, you now as an audience, is the management team of the Fresh Connection. So you've just been appointed, you've all just been promoted, and you need to make sure that 4 functional areas of the Fresh Connection, being purchasing, operations, sales, and supply chain, that they start working better. That they start working better departmentally, but they also start collaborating better. So we get to a better result, financially speaking, but also to become more resilient, because that's what this talk is all about, of course. So again, it's a simplified approach. We cannot touch upon all the subjects that Yoshi Shefi and Martin Christopher has spoken about, but we can at least give it a try and make some first steps into becoming resilient. Now, going back to the model, like I said, we cannot do everything at the same time, so we're going to take it one bite at a time, and we're going to focus on these 4 darker blue areas, the engineering part, the collaboration part, culture, and agility. And we're going to use a tool, and that tool is Mentimeter. And Mentimeter is going to help me to include you in playing, in gamifying supply chain resilience. So I'm going to go over now to Mentimeter. I'm going to toggle there. And if someone in the audience can give me a signal that you can properly see this, can someone give me a cue, by a verbal cue? Can we all see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah,
oh,
good.
Can see it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So what people now need to do, they can either take their iPhone or their iPad and scan the QR, and then they will be taken to the polling that we're going to do, or they can key in, if they go to the URL www.menti.com, what you see on top of your screen, you can key in a numerical code, a 7-digit code, and you end up in the same poll. So please all do that first, because then I can start my storyline. I already see some hearts coming in of people. That means that people are joining, and this is working, so that is great. That's good news. And then let's begin, because if we're going to the PowerPoint shortly, being a bit stubborn as I am, I'm going to start with the culture part. I have a little storyline for you that takes place inside the Fresh Connection. So now let's also, since we're all on Mentimeter, and for those of you who are not on, I see 20 people on. So for those of you who are not on yet, the numerical code will stay on top of your screen whilst I go through the questions that I have cooked up for you. So no worries about that. And if we need a QR code later on, I can also invoke that to appear on screen. But I'm going to take you to the Fresh Connection. So let's go. And here we are. We are in the Fresh Connection, and I have a little storyline for you. I already had a storyline for you that the Fresh Connection was not doing so well. So here we have the fruit juice company, and let me first depict to you why the company is not doing well. And for those of you who are not so connected to finance, I have a bit of bad news between quotes. everything we do in our supply chain has a financial consequence as well, whether we like it or not. So, and at the moment, the Fresh Connection is running at a loss. And running at a loss means that we have so-called contracted sales revenue from the 3 retailers that I briefly introduced to you. But those retailers are not being serviced in a way that we promised them. We are underachieving in relation to the sales promise we have with them. And that sales promise, I will show that in a minute as well. But they're penalizing us. That is what these big retailers, big as opposed to the size of the Fresh Connection, that they can do. They have the power in the supply chain. If you promise them the moon, but you don't deliver on that, then they're not happy with you. Now, we have a situation that we have the supply chain of the Fresh Connection a little bit explained to you. We have a financial situation that is not too rosy. And the storyline is now that we have a so-called supermarket war going on. And in this supermarket war are 3 retailers that we have contracts with. And you see the contracts on the right of your screen. You see food and groceries I have a contract with. And you see Land Market that I have a contract with. And all the way down you see Dominic's that I have a contract with. And in this contract, I need to promise them, first of all, what is the service level that I will deliver with? And the service level that I'm delivering is, by the way, measured in order lines. Order lines delivered on time in full. But since I'm delivering a food product, they also want to have a certain big part of the shelf life of that particular food product, of our 6 fruit juice products. They want to have the bigger part of that still remaining when they get the delivery, because they have to run their own inventory management. They have to make sure, because we deliver there, to make that clear, we deliver their central distribution centers, and from there on, they deliver to their own stores. So they need a big part of that shelf life still remaining to be able to do so. And since they are retailers, they also sometimes run so-called promotions in their store, and we support those promotions to a certain degree. At the moment, that degree is set to middle. Now, we said we're going to focus on culture first. And the salesperson, that's not a person that really collaborates well with his other colleagues in purchasing, operations, and supply chain. He goes rogue quite a number of times, and he is much impressed by what his customers are asking him. And at this moment, his customers are asking him to, since they are in a retail war, they are telling him to increase shelf life. They want a fresher product. They are telling him to increase, to more heavily support promotional pressure, and they're also telling him that the promotion horizon that is already set short will remain short. So they will tell you as late as possible, and that means that they have the most time available to do their own planning. So they're not really willing to help you. So what we're going to do is add this, like I said, the culture is not really one of collaboration. So the salesperson caves and says, okay, dear customer, without talking to purchasing, operations, and supply chain, I'm simply going to do your bidding. I'm going to do what you ask. So I open up these contracts, and I'm going to add 80% of shelf life. I'm going to say promotion pressure goes to heavy. And then I'm going to calculate. And that also, a little index here on the bottom tells me the so-called contract index is becoming higher. So that also means I'm getting higher prices for my product, meaning my so-called contracted sales revenue based on my promises will go up. If I make that, we need to see about that. But at least the customer is so happy that they're willing to pay me more for that, for the changes that I just made to the contract. So I'm going to put that contract in for food and groceries. I'm going to do the same with Land Market. I'm going to say, okay, you need 80% of shelf life still remaining to do your own inventory management and supply chain management. You want me to promote your promotions heavily. Promotion horizon is going to stay short. And I put that in as a deal. And then Dominic's, I do the same thing. So, having said all that, plugging that all in. Now, what is interesting, this remains short. What is interesting now is that if I calculate the outcomes of these changes, what will happen? And I will switch on the calculation. Then I will go back to Mentimeter. So you need to watch your phone or your iPad if you're on Mentimeter as well. And if I'm going to calculate the outcome, I want you to predict what happens. And you're going to get a number of options that you can choose from. So I'm going to switch on calculation. Are we sure? Yes, I'm sure. And so the calculation is now running. And now I'm going back to Menti. And what I need you to do is, based on the storyline that I told you, what I need you to do, the supermarket war is going on. We have done more promotion support. We have given more product freshness. And the customers still wanted to announce promotions to the Fresh Connection as late as possible. And the VP of Sales has caved. What do you think will happen to the results of the Fresh Connection? And what will happen to the supply chain? Will we incur more penalties? We saw that we already had penalties from our customers. Will we see obsoletes going up? Because we're delivering a fresher product. So perhaps that makes our own inventory management. We didn't make any changes to our own inventory management. So what will happen to our own inventory management in that sense? Will production costs go up? And as a result of what? Will purchase value go up, for instance? That's also a question. Doesn't seem to be such a very popular answer possibility. But you can have more answers to this one particular question. So I see that we have about 18 people have given an answer. It takes a little while for the Fresh Connection to run its outcome. So let's see if the simulation is ready. Oh, I still see answers coming in. Products cost, that seems to be the most favorite answer. We have 18 answers there. So yeah, let's go back and see if the Fresh Connection already has results for us. And here we are, and we see already at the bottom our score minus 21.4%. So if we look at finance now, based on the changes that we made, we see that customers were really happy with the promises that we made. They were way more ambitious, but all of a sudden we're getting very stiff penalties. And that means that we were not able to deliver to what we just promised. We decided to have a much bigger, much more shelf life promised. We said we're going to increase promotions, so we were allowing more volatility into the demand pattern of the supply chain. So if we go to sales now, our obsolete products, the little trend graph that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. On the left-hand side of your screen, there's obsolete product. That little trend graph says it goes up, and obsoletes, for your information, were about 8%. They have gone to 12%. So that means that we're throwing away product, and because we are throwing away product, we still need to make our deliveries to our clients. So production costs go up because I need to replace inventory that I throw away, because not fresh enough inventory anymore that I cannot deliver to my clients since it doesn't fulfill the freshest promise. I throw that away, but I need to make it again and create a fresh enough product to still be able to deliver. That also means that my purchase value goes up, as you can see, because replacing not fresh enough product also causes that I have to buy extra components, and I'm using extra components, so purchase value goes up as well. And what else do we have in our Mentimeter? And we said production costs going up, purchase value up, obsoletes up. And perhaps the biggest thing here is, since we were not able to live up to our promise, since we were throwing more product away and we had a big capacity issue in production. And let's look at how we did in terms of sales. I was promising 95% of service level, and now my customer is getting service level and order lines below 80. So they're giving me stiff penalties. Okay, now we need to move on. We're on a tight schedule, so let's then look at collaboration. If we would collaborate a little bit more, then would things then improve? So if we're going back to the situation in the Fresh Connection, our salesperson wakes up and says, I need to collaborate more. So I'm going back to my customers, and I'm going to ask them to at least tell me about promotions somewhat earlier. I'm also going to talk to supply chain, and I'm going to ask supply chain to become somewhat more flexible in their production schedule. And since I will know more about, since I will know earlier about promotions coming, and since I will become more flexible, I will reduce my safety stocks. I can do with less safety stocks. I need a fresher product, so I will produce more often. And because of that, I will also start with operations to give me more capacity. Because as we saw, we already also had an issue in terms of production capacity. So having said that, I'm going back to my contracts. I'm going to tell the promotion. I'm going to renegotiate with my clients and say, hey, as a salesperson, this really didn't work out well. You are also at the receiving end of this. So let's put our promotion horizon back to middle. So at least we have some more time to know about a promotion coming, to prepare, perhaps lock that volatility up in our production schedule as well. Because if I'm going to supply chain and if I'm going to freeze the production schedule less far out in the future, then I'm getting a better, I stand a better chance of making sure that I can deliver my customers. And in case I run out of stock, I can react more quickly. So I'm going to make my promotion horizon set to 2 weeks time. That's what I'm going to do. I said I also need, since I know about volatility coming earlier, I'm going to put my safety stocks at 1.5 weeks. And not only because of knowing about promotions earlier, but also because I'm going to add another shift in production later on as well. So that is done. I'm going to produce more often to create a fresher product. And this is all collaboration between sales and supply chain so far, because based on the promise that sales made, he's talking and collaborating now with his supply chain colleague. Say, hey, can we become more flexible in terms of planning, and can we do something about inventory management to make sure we have a fresh enough product? And then in operations, he goes to operations, he or she, the salesperson, can I have this extra shift? And it is like magic, so it doesn't operate like that in the real world, I realize that. But now we have everything in. We have an extra shift, we have our promotion horizon set to middle, so we know about the promotion coming earlier. We have our frozen period of production set to 2 weeks. We have our safety stocks reduced. We produce more often. We have an extra shift. Now, we're going to calculate once more. And now the interesting thing is, what will happen? And I'm going to give you another question. So now we have gone into collaboration mode. So what will happen if we are going into collaboration mode? Will we get less obsoletes because I'm having less inventory? Will we get less overtime? Yeah, so I added another shift. So will that happen? Will we get a better service level? Will we be able to deliver instead of almost below 80 in some cases? Will we be able to do a better service level? Or will we get better production plan adherence as well? And better production plan adherence means how well am I able to meet to work according to the plan I put in place. So let's see what is going on. I see answers popping in, and that's encouraging. That means at least technology is working for us. So that is great. We're using the Floor app in Google. We're using the Fresh Connection in Safari. We're using this in Internet Edge, and we're also running and sharing a PowerPoint. So it's quite tech heavy what we're doing here, but it seems all to be working. And I see around 20 answers. Less overtime is the least favorite. Better service level is the most favorite answer. So yeah, then let's have a look and see if the Fresh Connection is already done. And I need to mind the time. So let's go there. And we have gone to a much better result. So look here, I have very little penalty still, and I've been able to do a lot better performance. So first of all, let's take a look at how we did in terms of our clients. Look at the customer report. Now I've come very close to what I was promising. 94.3%, 94.9, 94.6. That is really good. Where have obsoletes gone? Obsoletes have gone back to a more, from 12 to 9.9%. Still decent amount of obsoletes, but at least a lot better. If I go back to finance, how was my overtime doing? Well, I added another shift. So that was 100,000 extra in terms of an extra shift, but I wiped out almost all overtime as well. So that is good. What happened to production plan adherence? Production plan adherence, you see a big uptick here in the trend graph. That's the fourth KPI that you see on screen. It went to 88.9%, almost 89%. So that's also nice. But I did see in the sales reports, I did see in terms of customers that I was still not performing as I was promising. I still had some penalties left. Now I'm looking at it from a customer angle, but now it's time to go to our third area, and that's about supply chain re-engineering, but also much about the part of understanding and looking at our supply chain base and our supply chain design. Because if I look at the simulation, not only from a customer point of view, but if I look at my product review, a product report, I can also check how am I doing in terms of service level at a product basis. And if I look at the column a little bit to the right of the middle of the screen, you see service level and order lines at product level, and there is something remarkable going on. We see 6 products there that we're making, and the third line and the 6th line, they speak about C power. That means there's a vitamin C additive in there. And those 2 particularly are poor in performance. They are below 95%. The 4 others are above 95%. So trying to understand my supply chain better, vitamin C is an issue. Now, the easy way out of there is have more stock, have more inventory. Now, I can say that, but it also means an investment in inventory. But what am I spending on vitamin C? Well, on vitamin C, I'm spending very, very little if I go back to finance again. These numbers of my suppliers of purchase value tell me exactly what am I spending my money on. On vitamin C, I'm spending very little money. So increasing stock there or asking for more performance from my supplier will not break the bank. So that's also providing me with more understanding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to purchasing. And what I will tell my purchasing supplier, I would like to have more service level delivered by them. It's only set at 90%. Why on earth would I ask for 90% only? That's not really helping. So I'm going to set that to 99%. I'm going to calculate that. And by the way, and I'm going to push deal. And the contract index goes up somewhat that you see at the bottom. Let me see if that is in, because it sprang away quite easily. Yeah. So the contract index has gone up a little bit. That was indicating to me that the price went up a bit. That's not a big deal, considering the spend that I had. Then in supply chain, to prove my point, I looked at it from a finished product point of view, but you can see here, in terms of component availability, that vitamin C was really a poor performance. So we have asked for 99% of service level from the supplier now to remediate that. And if we're going to supply chain and look at components, since we spend so little on it, let's have somewhat more safety stock. That will not be a big investment. Save that as well. And then we're going to calculate again and see what happens there. So calculate, and we're going to run it. And now the interesting question is, in Mentimeter, what will be the strongest effect? If we're going to, what we just did, to recap that, we put in more vitamin C safety stock, and we negotiated a better service level with our supplier. So if I move that away a bit, you will see you have the answer options on your screen. What will happen? Will you get better component availability for vitamin C? Will we have less penalties from our customers because we had some left? Will we need more warehouse space? Or will the inventory investment go up? So please let me have your answers. You're seeing better component availability for vitamin C. You see Inventory investment go up, less penalties, and more warehouse space needed, which is the least favorable answer. Not all people have answered so far, so I'm still missing quite a number of answers here. So please give me your answers. In terms of time, I only have 10 minutes left. Sorry, I have about 15 minutes left, so we need to make sure that we're going into the right direction in terms of time management. Please let me have your answers. Yeah, answers are coming in now, which is fine. And let me then check if the fresh connection is already done calculating. And we have a result. And the result has become slightly better. So we even have a little bonus now. So penalties have gone, which is great, but we're still running a little bit at a loss. So that means elsewhere in terms of cost, we may be able to save some costs as well, but at least we're walking the talk. We have a small bonus. We're overachieving a little bit, which is great. Did purchase value go up? Well, only a fraction. So that is really not breaking the bank, as I said. What happened to component availability? Component availability, that went to 100% even. It was around 80, and that went to 100%. And we have more warehouse space needed. What did we say about that? We need more warehouse space. Well, if I look at finance again, looking at the warehouse space that we have, and we need to look at inbound. And the inbound situation is not that great because we have overflow, and that overflow only increased a little bit because of the extra safety stock that we plugged in for vitamin C. So that was really a little effect. Okay, having settled out, going to, and minding the time again, going to area number 4, looking at agility. Now, looking at agility, let's also take a look at our supply in terms of where our suppliers are, and how visible that supply is, and how quickly that supply can be. And I want to take a special look on vitamin C. On PET bottles, I should say. Now, PET bottles, the question to you is, what are we buying if we're buying PET bottles besides plastic? And that's a bit of a rhetorical question, because I know the answer. If we're buying PET bottles, besides buying plastic, we're buying a lot of air. And we're driving around a lot of air, and we're storing a lot of air. Now, in supply chain, if we get a lot delivered for PET bottles, we get 4 weeks worth of expected demand, and we hold 2 weeks worth of expected demand in safety stock. Now, looking at our components report, I'm using around 220,000 bottles each week. So safety stock plus a delivery of 4 weeks worth of expected demand is 1.1 million bottles. That's what I need storage space for time and time again. So can I do something about that? Not driving around air and not storing air, because driving around air is also a thing that I want to take a look at. If I look at my suppliers, and if I look at the supplier report for PET, I can see that almost half of my purchase value in PET is transportation cost. So I'm making a lot of cost driving around here. So do I have alternatives? Can I find a supplier in terms of velocity closer by? Can I become more agile here? I'm going to the supplier market. I'm going to look if I have alternative PET suppliers. I'm going to do a search. And I see I have one in France, 15 days. That's even further out. My current principal supplier is 10 days out. And then I have Philip Jones, 5 days in the Netherlands. Isn't that fantastic? So I'm going to select them. And by the way, I'm also going to do something about quality, because I want my quality to be high. And since I need these humongous quantities, I'm going to buy full truckloads. I'm going to calculate my contract again, and I'm going to push the deal button. So now I've taken care of less driving around of air. What I'm also going to do is, when I get a delivery, I want to have 1 week's of lot size instead of 4 weeks worth of lot size. And then I need a lot less inbound warehouse space. So what I'm also going to do, I'm being bold about it. collaborating as we are as a team, I'm going to set the space of the inbound warehouse to be 750 locations. So that's all in now, and I'm going to calculate the outcome. And my question to you now is, calculation is running. My question to you now is, what will be the impact of what I did in terms of pet? I found a nearer pet supplier. I set the pet loss size to be smaller, and I reduced the inbound warehouse in size. So what will happen? According to one of you in the audience, purchase value will increase. Ordering costs will increase. Definitely. I fully agree with that, because we're going to order more since we are ordering in smaller lot sizes. I'm not so sure about the purchase value, though, if that will increase. And what about the inbound warehouse overflow? Will that increase? I don't see any answers there for the moment. About 10 minutes left on the clock. So in terms of time management, we're good. We will have some time left for Q&A as well. Let's see. I see 12 answer options here. Let's see if the simulation is there already. And the simulation is there already. So final chance to pop in your answers. No one is opting for the inbound warehouse overflow, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, ordering cost will increase. That's, I think, the main culprit. And purchase value will increase. Not so sure about that one. So, looking at this. Looking at purchase value, we went from Trio Pet, no longer buying there, to Philip Jones, and actually the costs are a lot less. Purchase value dropped, mainly because if we look at our purchasing report, because the transportation value has gone down quite a bit. So that is helpful. The other thing is that what happened to our warehouse situation, looking at it from a financial angle. We had lots of overflow, and the overflow is for a great deal gone, and even in combination with a smaller warehouse. Did we then have more ordering costs, administratively speaking? Order lines, yeah, we had some. Inbound order lines and orders both went up a bit, but that's small potatoes considered to the savings that I've had. So, having said all this, what other measures could we have taken to make our supply chain more resilient? I do have a little thought on that. Just spend a minute on that. Just enter a word. This is a word cloud. Maybe you have some other nice things that you're saying, you could have done this, you could have done that. You didn't touch upon this topic, you didn't touch upon that topic. So that's the last question that I have in this poll for you. That's where the interactive element stops. So if there are thoughts on your mind and areas that you say, Hans, you should have taken a look there as well, please feel free to enter these now. I don't see any options coming in. Incredible visibility. Yeah, that's absolutely helpful. Control tower. Yeah, it is a bit. That's a bit of a control tower. Is of course, it's a great word and a great concept, but making it work is not the easiest thing to do. That requires a lot more than keying in these two words. But absolutely, a control tower may help. Other thoughts that are on people's minds, perhaps. Nearshoring, yeah, especially relevant in these Corona days. Employee satisfaction, that's a good one because that doesn't apply. That doesn't show on the balance sheet, but it absolutely helps. I'm sure about that. So yeah, some nice ideas. What I would like to do is go back to my PowerPoint. We said one bite at a time. In terms of gamification, we took some bites at becoming more resilient in a very simplistic and practical way, I think. We didn't do a lot of rocket science, but I hope we got the message clear that in all of these areas, you can already do little things. Engineering, collaborate, improve culture, become more agile. Those are all areas that you can easily make steps in. Now, if you're interested in more supply chain gamification, Ken Tismus, who was originally supposed to introduce me, knows a lot more about this when it comes to the simulations that we run in South Africa. Also does CPIM, by the way, and both are connected to a so-called Global Professional Challenge that is coming up in 2 weeks' time. Do reach out to them if you want to know more. If you're interested in more supply chain gamification, they can tell you a lot more about that as well. And that's all for the commercial messaging because that's not what this presentation is for. What I'm left with is some time for questions. So I would like to open up the room for questions. If there are questions, we have about 5 minutes left. So Jenny, if you have people that you see who have a question, by all means, shoot.
Great. I'm looking in the discuss, and I bullied people into asking Kristen Cox questions yesterday. So surely there's something in that presentation that really piqued interest. Hans, I've seen you do this a number of times now, and I just have to say, every time it gets better. You know, the level of professionalism, the swiftness, the knowledge that you impart in a very short space of time, and this is one of the shortest times. There's a question here from Bradley who's saying, can you recommend platforms to use to create these sorts of gamification models for training purposes? Well, yeah, we know which one we can recommend.
Yeah. To add to that, full disclosure, we have a platform ourselves.
Yeah.
So that is how this goes. But there's many good simulations out there. Also, to be brutally honest, and it doesn't all have to be technical as well. You can even simulations or experiential learning already starts with role play. So it doesn't have to be all that technology laden as well. How do jewelers learn about a robbery? They do role play with a robbery, and they have actors to do that. So you can already start there. Beer game, like I said, great simulated event with paper and pencil. But of course, you have more sophisticated approaches like we do. We develop our own simulations completely off scratch. But there's others who offer these kind of simulations as well. Of course, we do tend to focus. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. No, what I was going to say was that obviously there's a big difference between, there are a lot of open source simulations as well, but the big difference in a thing like this is that it's been built by practitioners for practitioners. Yeah. So actually, that's the huge value.
Yeah. Actually, well, it came a bit out of frustration because supply chain management is a team sport in our belief. It's totally a team sport. So if you don't have multiple functional departments in the team playing along, then it becomes really hard to have a good supply chain performance at the end of the day in many companies. And like you said yourself, I've been through that in the trenches myself. I've seen that as a departmental manager, but also as a consultant. And I still see that as a trainer. I visit many multinational companies, and the idea that supply chain management is a team sport. Once people make that leap and they suddenly see, oh, if I'm changing something in my area, that also has an effect somewhere else. And in simulation, you can give that instant feedback because, we pretend time goes by very quickly. We calculated a few minutes, but then actually we were half a year further down the road and we saw the impact of what we did. So you give instant feedback about what happens, especially in other areas. So you see the cross-functional element there as well.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good question from Christian, who was there in 2011, and is just wondering what new features have been added and new learnings, which I think you'll be amazed how up to date it is.
Yeah, so what we've done, we started out focusing on collaboration, and therefore sales and operations planning was one of the first topics that we tackled. But since 2011, we have content on external collaboration. We have content on carbon footprint. We have content on more elaborate sales and operations planning setup with constrained capacity. We have content that speaks about the fresh connection starting to deliver abroad. We recently launched a whole new piece of content on supply chain resilience to a much more detailed degree than you see here. So we have our classic supply chain risk setups, but we also have our resilience setups. And at the moment, we're working on a new release of the Fresh Connection that will totally focus on sustainable development goals of the UN. So we have a very large library of content, but that content is only there to satisfy learning goals. That's the first question we always ask. If we go into any training, whether that's with a university or with a multinational company, what do people need to walk away with at the end of the day to make sure that everything is properly set up and complexity increases over time at a level that is digestible.
Yeah, and Hans, the comments are coming in saying brilliant, thanks for the feedback, etc., etc. Prince's comment, I think, is kind of like, it's that moment where you've done something right, which is where we know this is online, we know this is an artificial environment, but you actually made it feel like we were doing this in person. So thank you very, very, very much for that. And I think that, in the essence of time, I think we'll call it end on a positive there. But really, as always, so professional, so informed, really, really great. And again, I'm going to say it again and again and again, the joy of working with supply chain professionals in an event environment is everybody delivers on time. It's wonderful. I love it. So thank you very much, Hansen. Safe trip back to the Netherlands. Here's hoping we see you here soon, very, very soon one day.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me. And thanks, a big thanks to the audience as well. Have a great rest of your conference, Jenny, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Hans. And thanks, everybody, for participating. It was great. See you in the next.
See you in the next one.